This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, an open source non-ICO crypto project powered by community. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. That's TUSC.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Hey, Rob McNealy here, and today I am super excited. I am talking to someone who is an expert in personal security, privacy on the internet, and general all-around smart guy when it comes to crypto hacking, software development. He goes by Nixops, but his real name is Daniel Jones, which I think sounds either like a fake name or something. But how are you today, Dan?
I'm good. No, it's my real name. Most people assume it's fake, but it's actually my name. My parents had no originality.
Well, that's okay. So we've been connected on social media for a while, and
Yes.
you dig into some cool stuff, and you really talk about a lot of privacy related stuff. And there's a lot of stuff happening out there, I think, right now that people aren't really even hearing about or talking about. But I just want to talk a little bit about your background, and then let's just jump in to talk about a bunch of different stuff. So tell the audience who doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this space.
I'm a programmer. I started off as a Linux, Unix sysadmin and started learning C, C++. And from there, I got into driver development, became a software engineer. I mean, I started working with, I have a wide range of experience from driver development, OS level stuff to software as a service to high performance computing, cryptography, and cryptocurrencies. I just, like I always say on my tagline, I'm a general purpose hacker. Whatever you need to be done and money's right, I'll build it.
So are you independent then, or do you work for a company?
I am working for a company right now. I'm working for two companies right now. I also do a lot of independent work and some open source development. It just depends on time. That shit right there, if you can figure out how to add a few more hours per day, I would pay you a lot for that. If you can just make that happen.
I'm working on it. My magic wand. Actually, it'll be our next rollout on, a hard fork number, blah, 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 extra hours in the day.
Block 700K, you gonna put that in?
Well, I mean, like I get that too. Cause we do our little crypto project and we're open source and everybody's got a full-time day job. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, people don't understand what that really means. I think the words community project have been thrown around so many times, but if people actually knew what the hell it took to just manage a community project and actually get stuff done in a community project, they would go out of their minds. Just from definitely. A project management standpoint.
Well, I mean, that's what a lot of people really don't get. So like the open source community, and something that a lot of people have no idea that how much open source and free software they use and they rely on every day, even services such as this one that we're using, majority of it is built upon free and open source software. And the thing is that these companies pay individuals to work some of their time to contribute to them for features and things they need. And when you break away from company paying for that, and it's truly community, like truly open source, truly just individuals running it, people don't understand that we got bills to pay, things like that. They don't really grasp that just because you write code, they think that you're going to get what Silicon Valley pays you. No, that's not how it works. Someone has to foot the bill. And if someone's not footing the bill for that, your time is completely free, and that's fine. But there are also, you got responsibilities, you know what I mean? You got mortgages, you got car notes, you got everything else, just like everyone else does. But the thing is like, you hope and strive to get to the point where you don't have to worry about that. But at the same time, you're still writing software. And if you're doing it for free, it can be cumbersome because you still have to work a day job to put food on the table and to be able to survive. And rent ain't cheap. It ain't free either. You know what I'm saying? Like, depending on where you are. So I think that's also a misconception people have, is like, oh, I know somebody's an open source developer and they get paid, X to do this. And it's like, yeah, but they're being paid by a company because they use that software. So they need a contributor at their company to push the features they need and want. And I think that's a lot of times where the confusion sets in, because in cryptocurrency, it's, we look at that as centralization, but in reality, when you look at like free and open source software, that's just the way of the game. You know what I mean? Like, outside of like coin X or whatever, you look at a coin that's mainly company controlled, because they're paying all the devs and they have their resources, whether they ICO'd or not, which I'm not a fan of the ICO world, but regardless, you know, they're being funded. And open source GNU projects, for example, it can be very hard to be funded. So a lot of times companies are the people who put people in charge of maintaining that software because they use it. And so I think, like you said, the community-driven projects and community-ran projects, people don't realize just how many man hours, or human hours, I should say, that takes. It takes a lot, because you have to have project management scopes, you know, what features you're going to add, who can deliver that feature on time. Life happens. So if you only got like a team of 2 or 3 developers, what's going to happen if someone gets sick, ran over by a bus, whatever? You know, you take all that into consideration, and people often overlook all that.
And I think even from a project management standpoint, when you're dealing with, you know, truly, you know, community driven open source software, is that people can be really flaky. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of flaky people that say, yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, I want to work. I think people get really excited about being a part of something, and then they don't show up. It's like, well, this really is work. Okay. It sounds great, but you know, ultimately there needs to be some work done. And I think a lot of people, it's like almost like they like the LARP that they do open source, you know, contributions, when they're just like, you know, and they don't show up. And I think that's kind of frustrating too, on the community program in programming side.
I think you also have to look at it from another standpoint too. Like, say for example, I can use this for my own personal. So say for example, you have a project, you've outlined the scope, you've built all these documentation, and then next thing you know, you end up in some snafus over intellectual property of some other code. So now all of a sudden you're having to halt what you're able to push, even for open source, because you don't want that intellectual property to then get compromised, because there may be a dispute over when it was written, who technically owns it, that kind of thing. And that happened to me before, and it happens to a lot of people. And like, thankfully now that stuff is behind me. But you know, people are very greedy, and especially in Silicon Valley, which I'm so glad I'm out of now, by the way. So I'm an ex-Valley guy, and no longer going back to that. But you know, the Valley is one of those things. And shit, I gotta handle something. 1 second, I got a wasp about to hit me. One moment.
Well, be safe. Don't get killed by the wasp. Is it like a murder hornet kind of thing, or?
There's 2 of them in here. I didn't realize that. I'm allergic to those fucking things.
Well, don't get killed by the murder hornet.
Yeah, they're not murder hornets. They're just typical South Mississippi fucking big ass wasps. So it's just going to be a painful thing. But anyway, yeah, I mean, like, you know, some of the things that people don't get is that software is complicated, especially when you're working a day job and you're trying to do open source contributions. Who owns it, depending on contractual agreements and things like that. And then also what state you're operating in, because a lot of people don't understand that some states honor non-competes, some don't. Even if your software, in some states, there's precedents where, you know, they haven't had much of a tech industry. So say, for example, you write software that just does something on the network, you may be in violation of your very own invention agreement that you signed on your employer. Even though your employer verbally may tell you it's okay, it's still problematic, because it depends on how well that now verbally agreed upon project that you kicked or that you pushed out. Now, if that takes off, your company or your employer may decide they want it. You see what I mean? And like, that's a complicated sector that people really don't get into, because unless you work in the industry, you really don't know. So like in the crypto space, you have a lot of people who read up on some boot camp stuff and done a few, you know, playgrounds. And they think they can write code professionally, and they don't realize that it's a lot more complicated than just putting together a couple of tutorials. You know what I mean? Like, there's more to it. You have product spec, you have ideas, you have to look at longevity, you have to look at scaling, you have to look at a number of factors that boil down to your design. And if you've never implemented something in production, or if you've never had real users, then how are you supposed to know how to construct that? You see what I mean?
Absolutely. Privacy. One of the things that we're seeing right now.
Let me kill this fucking thing.
Okay.
I have my EpiPen on me.
No worries, man. It's all good. All right. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about privacy and the state of privacy in the digital world, where we are right now. So tell me a little bit, like, or at least tell the audience a little bit about what you see is the state of privacy right now. just in general? What would you say where we are as a culture with our online presences right now? Where is privacy?
Privacy is dying very quickly, and it's all being derived from, a lot of that's coming from companies like Amazon, Google, and others who are pushing smart home. Siri, even Apple is guilty of it. But a lot of these features that are nice to haves end up becoming compromising situations for the individual. And, and what I mean by that is that, like, a lot of, I use phrases like Snowden, and people will say, oh, well, I ain't got nothing to hide. Great. Just because you don't have anything to say, do you not need your freedom of speech? And then they're like, oh, well, it's not quite the same. And it's like, well, yeah, it is, because think about it like this. What's your last four of your social and your mother's maiden name? And they're like, well, I'm not going to give you that. Well, you have something to hide. Otherwise, then you would be fine with giving me that information. So why are you not okay with giving me that information? But instead, you're willing to give a company, oh, well, this company protects that data. We know that's a fallacy. Companies get hacked all the time, compromise. Individual employees that work at these companies do nefarious things, such as stalk and listen in on individuals and do things that are beyond their reach and scope of their job. And we know that for 100% fact. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's nothing new. And what I'm seeing today is that people are just okay with it. Just like this Google and Apple, integration. That's why I told people to stop updating their phones, because they're, the future patch releases will have that framework in there. And
tell me about that. What you do? Let's step back a little bit. What do you mean not update phones? What's going on with the updates?
Well, so for example, updates are always dangerous for automatic updates. You should really try to make sure that you understand what an update is before you run it, just like in Bitcoin or anything else. You need to know what the software that you're installing on your device does. And the problem with proprietary software is that's hard to do because companies aren't going to release their secret sauce. Then on the other token, when you start looking at Android, you have an issue where, you have OEM manufacturers who release stuff that's not public either. There are drivers on certain phones, I can't list brands because of my work with them in the past, that have features that aren't necessarily noted or properly able to be found unless you're under an NDA with them, in which case you can't even speak about it post working on it. You have trackable software, you have things that can enable features on your phone, such as your mic, camera, things like that can turn them on, off, or in the cases of Apple, Google, agreement, where these future updates, they're going to allow the tracing apps to work for contact tracing, who you came in contact with. But in reality, they can already do that with your MZ, and they can already do that with your cell phone. The problem is that it's not presented in a clean data way, and there's a subpoena that's required to get that information per person, which adds a hurdle for law enforcement. At the same time, there's pros and cons to that. The good side is that, oh, well, we'll be able to distinguish who came in contact with an infected person, blah, 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 blah. And that's great. That's good to some level. But at what risk? Because again, just because this feature is enabled for this one-time event, does it ever get turned off? Look at the Patriot Act, look at anything else. Like, we never regain what we had once we lose it. That's not how privacy works. And the dangerous part is that now with biometrics and things like that, a lot of people are reliant on that on their phones. These companies have the ability to access those enclaves as long as their application is signed. And so literally they can do approvals for updates on devices for certain feature sets, things like that, or auto updates or module specifics, things like that. And the dangerous part about that is that's very slippery slope, because yes, they're already not trustworthy now, but just think about it. Once you start adding in who they're in contact with, now you can start doing real correlation attacks to figure out who these people's circle of friends are, who their family members are, things like that. And like I've discussed it before, that's dangerous, especially because of people like Ava from the Electronic Frontier Foundation and others who have talked about stalkerware. Now you're presenting an API for stalkerware, basically, that governments are going to be able to use. But just remember, just because a government has access to it doesn't mean no one else will, as we found that out before too. Once you open Pandora's box, it's open. And the risk there is the individual privacy and the idea that I have the protection to do what I want without fear of retribution. I should not be afraid of who I come in contact with, and neither should you. However, under the guise of security or the idea of it, people are willing to sacrifice those liberties. And Jefferson said it best, those that are willing to sacrifice freedom and liberties for the idea of security deserve neither.
So with government using this for, I would argue that contact tracing, at least contact tracing can be analog as well, not just digital,
Yeah.
is one of the things that the countries that have gone through and started getting COVID under control. They tested early and they did contact tracing, and then they isolated people away from their houses. That's how they've been able to do this. Now, I don't disagree with you. I think that people being able to access everything about you digitally, remotely, without permission or without a warrant is an issue, because it will be abused by somebody, whether it's a government agent or just through government ineptitude. A hacker will get access to it, or a foreign power could get access to it. It seems like there's a massive security issue or multiple security issues based on that, when you can still do contact tracing manually and analog, which I think is the more appropriate way. I think
Yes.
is the way you should handle that. But I don't even like electronic voting, so that's just me.
Well, I mean, they make a big stink about that stuff, like electronic systems are prone to vulnerabilities and problems because they're written by people, because people are prone to that.
Well, I think ultimately a lot of people that are making these decisions about implementing these kind of surveillance technologies, even though it sounds good on its face, I think a lot of the people that are doing it, one, at least in the government side, one, maybe don't understand the ramifications long term and the potential security risks. But I think a lot of them, on the other hand, also might be getting bribed, because the companies that do produce these things, that's going to be, some good corporate welfare going their way as well. So I think there's a lot of concern about that. And I guess the question is, what do we do about it? What can an individual like me, what can I do about that right now? What can I do to help make my footprint safer on the privacy
Well,
level?
learning good OPSEC, but also like I started that OpVal series, and I haven't posted because I've been dealing with some matters, but that'll return this weekend. Use tools, but understand how to use them properly. For example, keep a stark separation of your online identities. If you're using an account for shit posting, for example, and you want it purely on that, don't merge that with your personal accounts. Keep that separate. Use separate devices. Use multiple devices. And especially now, you can get clean devices that are literally untraceable because of COVID. You can exploit a situation where you can go in and legally buy devices with cash that there's no traceable record that you bought it, because you can go in fully masked, covered up, no one knows who you are, and it's not even batting an eyelash. Whereas, back in January, if I was to do that, people would report me to the FBI. You see what I mean? Right now, people need to understand that there are attack surfaces for people, and then there are attack surfaces that open up for being able to fight to retain your privacy. You just need to understand what your goal is. For example, I have separation of my my personal accounts and my older accounts, and certain accounts that I do things with in regards to certain projects I work on. My aliases are not ever connected in any way. I don't even use the same devices, not even the same emails, never even touch the same GPG keys. Neither one of them have each other's public keys in their keychains, things like that. Those are important to understand, because if you have a traceable link, and especially in cryptography, which a lot of people don't really understand, and I'll put it this way, cryptography can be a great tool to protect you, but it can also sink your battleship. Understand that if you have cryptographically sound methods like GPG, and you sign something with a GPG key, that's as good as saying, this was me, this is my digital fingerprint. So anything else that's just digital fingerprint is important to understand, that wherever that may be, that can be used to correlate that you are that person. The biggest instance of this would have to be the Frosty at Frosty key. You're familiar with Frosty, right?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
So there was this guy, you may have heard of him, Ross Albright. So he used the Frosty key, Frosty at Frosty, to sign the Silk Road login page, but he also used it in Stack Overflow question. Now, yes. So you have to really understand that that is as good as saying, this is me, I have proof of this key. And so that's dangerous. And people have to understand that that is one of many bad OPSEC steps that he took, but that's one major OPSEC no-no. Never have keys, never sign keys, and never use them from accounts that are associated with who you are if you're doing anything that you don't want people to know about. I don't judge people. I don't care. Cryptography can't be gatekept, neither can encryption, and it shouldn't. But it will be used for good or bad. Same thing with the ClearNet, same thing with everything, right? And so like you, as an individual, you need to understand and make a decision on what you're willing to allow people to know and what you're not willing to allow people to know. And then from there, you derive a toolkit that makes sense for your exposure and what you're willing as a comfortable exposure rate, or a limit in this case. So like me, certain things people know about me, a lot of things people don't know about me, and I choose to never disclose that. And the reason why is because I believe in not doxing people, in the sense of like when people get petty on the internet and they like, here's their address or blah, blah, blah. I think that's stupid. That's also really ignorant, and that showcases that, you know, they themselves don't care about operational security of others, and they're endangering people by doing that. Now, I'm a firm believer, if you can't take some shit on the internet and you need to dox someone to get back at them, you probably need to grow the fuck up. And, you know, that's a growing trend on Twitter right now, is doxing people and exposing personal information about people, like where they live, things like that. There's a lot of people who, you know, we don't know their past. What if they have an ex that they've been hiding from for years? Now all of a sudden they have easy access to that information. You just open them up to be personally endangered because of your, you know, your ignorance and your anger and your emotions overwhelmed you to not think with logic and reason. And so like one of the things I like to tell people is be very careful also on who you expose what to. Remember, public channels are public. So if you say something on Twitter, expect it to be documented and archived, because while Twitter has policies on API gathering of what can be stored offline, all this other stuff, don't think for a second that there's not people who have archives of every tweet that's ever been made. There are. And it's constantly being analyzed, things like that. You know, stylography is being used to confirm who's tweeting and certain, you know, certain vocal steps, that kind of thing, to be able to trace who someone is. And the risk of that is that these companies are selling that data to analyze who is someone or who could be someone's other account. Same thing with like, you know, the Satoshi manhunt, all these things, all of those boil down to operational security and what people are willing to disclose. And the dangerous part is that as an individual, you have to make that choice, and that choice can be very hard if you're uninitiated into what it means. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like I can't go and tell my uncle, hey, you know, we're about your OPSEC, when he has no idea, but he also doesn't have a public facing anything other than his phone number associated with his business card. You see what I mean? Like for him, his operational security is a much different risk, and it's more in person than it is in a digital sense. So you have to divide that. You have to look at, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's how I would like to be. And then you have to figure out what works to make that a reality. And the dangerous part is there's really no guidebook on that. like there's not like a questionnaire you can fill out and be like, well, here's the tools you should use. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Because if you had a poll that did that kind of stuff, or a survey, literally that person running the survey would be collecting data on the individual pushing in the buttons.
So what are a good set of tools for people to protect their privacy with?
First thing I would suggest is everyone should learn PGP. Whether you're dealing with your mom, your grandmother, your best friend, whatever, PGP for email is a must. And the reason why is because you keep snooping eyes from looking. Plus, if you're using PGP with like iCloud or Gmail, which a lot of people have, or you know, it allows you to have some level of control of the security, and you don't have to necessarily upload your public key to a key server. You can give a public key, like I can give you my public key through a private channel, through Onion Share or whatever. And there's no trace that that transaction ever occurred between us. Then you have my public key, but we can communicate in encrypted email, cryptographically sound emails back and forth without having the fear of Google or someone else listening. Now, they will read it, but it'll be all encrypted. And the thing is that when you do that, that's one layer. Now, a lot of people say, well, I don't really use email. You use email for more important things than you use your text messages. Would you agree or disagree on that?
I would agree.
So if your first step or your important things is that you're using PGP, GPG or GNU GPG or Open GPG, whatever iteration of you know, general, pretty good privacy or GNU privacy guard, what you would see there is that, okay, first step, the important stuff I'm locking down. I now have, and ask companies to use PGP. A lot of companies actually do have it set up, and they use PGP or public-private keys in private, and they're willing to use it with outer-facing customers. You just have to request it. And the more people that request it, the more people will use it. And that's important, because that's the important channels, right? So like if you covered that ground, cool. Make sure you don't disclose certain email addresses with those keys to other people that you don't want to know or associated with your email address. For example, if you're using, you know, an iCloud account, it's probably not a good idea to use that same iCloud account if it's tied to, you know, your Apple Store account. Because if someone wants to really screw you over and they know enough personal information about you, and you use use security questions that are easily guessable because they know you, that's a security, like that's an attack surface. That's how a lot of celebrities got into trouble. That's also why you see those things on Facebook asking what's your favorite color, where you grew up at, those kind of things. Those are information gathering tools that people are using to be able to reset your information when and if they need it. So next step is use a good messaging service. Signal. Signal for your phone calls, Signal for your text messages. And if people don't use Signal, ask them to. It's not hard. It's easy to set up. Works on all your devices. I mean, it's really simple. You know what I mean? Like, and those two pieces right there cover a large attack surface for most people. Not to mention, you know, you're enforcing that these people have you as a contact in their phone. And you can use, you know, a burner phone with Signal, which I highly recommend. You can get a burner phone right now at Walmart or insert any United States retailer that you can go in fully masked, fully clothed, and buy, you know, a starter SIM card and a phone, and literally be able to do that. The next step is that if you really want to stay on that hardcore privacy, only have people who are important contact you on that number. Have another disposable phone for other businesses or whatever the hell you're doing. But also remember, smartphones are dangerous. So don't be opening links. Don't be opening your email, PDF attachments and shit like that, because there's malware in that stuff. Yeah. You know exactly what I'm saying. I don't have mine on me physically because I don't have any phones on me right now for GPS reasons. But yeah, it's at the house. But yeah. There's nothing wrong with the flip phone, man. I mean, I agree. I have several of them right now, and like I said, it's, again, that you don't have nothing to hide, but you may not want to expose yourself to everyone knowing everything about you. So like I said, start with the email, start with Signal, and then for your browsing habits, I would recommend Tor, but most people don't ever listen to me when I say use Tor properly and what that means. And basically what I mean by that is, don't have Tor open if you have Firefox, Chrome, and Safari also open on your device. Does that make sense? Because you're basically broadcasting to everyone that you have Tor running, and they can see that. The cookie information is being shared.
Who can see that?
Service providers, not just your ISP, but companies you log into. So say, for example, you have your Gmail account logged in through your browser, and you're turning around and going to Google, they're seeing the same traffic come from the same IP. They're going to know that there's distinguishable session IDs and things like that, especially if you're logged in on both, which is a bad no-no. Also, resizing Tor is dangerous because you can look at the packets and see whether or not there's been a resize. So if you can visibly see someone on your network, you can tell who's using it, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of dangerous stuff. Like, if people really want to understand how dangerous the world is, learn about cookies and learn about them really well, because the web is dangerous. Cookies can do a lot. They tell a company a lot. They can provide a lot of information. They provide a lot of stuff to advertisers, as well as the company who you may be using their services. And so, you know, the hard part is, like I said, there's really no easy guide for this kind of stuff. You have to really understand technology before you can protect yourself from it. And, you know, you're in tech, so am I. And that's why most of us in tech are almost Luddites in today's time, because we don't want any smart home. We don't want any of that garbage.
No.
We know what it is.
Well, it's kind of funny because like last year, we've been doing some remodeling around our house and trying to find a low-tech thermostat, for instance. We put in a new sprinkler system last year. Everything is Wi-Fi enabled now. And it was funny, like we put in a pretty, I'm not going to go on all the details, but on landscaping, but this crazy smart, sprinkler controller. We pulled the module because I don't want someone to be able to hack my sprinkler. And then, the doorbells with the ring thing. That's like the only kind of doorbell you can get almost. And I'm trying to find some low tech thing. And a lot of things in our house are very modern, right? I mean, we like tech, but I also, for the same reason, I just don't see opening up all these ways for people to come into my house and monitor things or be able to hack things that could be bad. And so you're right. I am very Luddite-ish, depending on what the tech is. On some things, I'm very tech forward and tech savvy, and other things I'm just like, no, I don't want that in my house. But it's interesting. But I have one of my cars that I use for work has like manual, doesn't even have electric windows. It's got roll-up windows. So
nothing wrong with that. I mean, like I said, I used to work in IoT as well. And the amount of information that's collected on the individuals running these servers, it should be criminal. And it's dangerous because, it's under the guise, oh, well, this makes your life easier. This allows you to do that. Yes, but at what cost? Like, I don't know about you, but like, say, for example, I'm having a personal conversation with someone about my health. I don't necessarily want Alexa to fucking know about it. Like, I'm sorry. Like people all the time ask me, well, like, you write software that, you've written software before that's used in Alexa or this, that, or the other. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, why don't you use those things? Because I fucking know what they do. Like when you build it, you have and you work on these things, you have a real understanding about the dangers, right? Majority of society isn't involved in tech enough to understand it. Like you show like someone an Echo Dot and you show that, hey, with a few little words, I can control your lights. Cool. They see that as a value add. They don't know that it's listening every couple of seconds to look for a trigger word to do something. They don't know that. They don't realize how that works, and that information is being sent to the cloud, and they also have no idea what cloud means. But cloud is just basically a distributed network of computers, meaning someone else's computer, and it stores all this information. That information is being parsed on a regular basis for various things, advertisement, what to push to you, what you might be interested in buying because they want your money. And then like that again goes back to, I hate to say this, going back to the Ring, Amazon's made deals with local police, law enforcement to allow them warranted access to someone else's Ring. So if your neighbor has a Ring and it's pointed at your house, they can literally just walk over or contact your neighbor and gain access to it without ever physically going there to look at it and without ever having to disclose to you. Now me, oh, you were you trying to hide? Are you selling drugs? No, but I don't need to know when somebody comes to my house and leaves. You know what I mean? Like who the fuck, why should my neighbor be giving that information out about me? You see what I mean? Like there are pros and cons to this. Yes, it's great helping solving a crime or a heinous crime, but you also have to understand that there are a lot of people who really don't want other people knowing what the hell they're doing because they believe in their right to privacy. Like me, I don't fucking want people to know that I showed up at, got home at 4 o'clock the other morning from a night out of drinking. I don't need them to know that. If they see me, cool, they can make fun of me. But if they didn't, I don't need the police to know that I got home at 4 in the morning being dropped off at with a Lyft or an Uber. You see what I'm saying? Or that someone gave me a ride, or that I used a cab because I decided to pay cash and, I just told them a general direction to drop me off in, that kind of thing. Because you have to pay attention to that stuff. Like, it's not that you have anything to hide, but you also don't want the world to know what you're doing. You see what I mean?
Well, I think the lot of thing that people don't understand is that it's not necessarily that one data point, but the cumulative data points about you that can be used against you. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's the way they can build profiles that not only, on the surface, it sounds great because, they're just trying to market to you, right? Well, okay, they're just trying to market to me. But the thing is, a lot of these people, these data brokers will sell this information to the highest bidder and they don't care who gets it, whether, it's just, some kind of retailer or whether or not it's a foreign you know, spy agency, for instance.
Or what if it's somebody that you have a you know, a protection order against, and all of a sudden they formed an LLC in a state, and they turn around and request that data to buy. Now they can track this person that they're not supposed to be tracking, and legally there's no way of knowing that. You see what I mean? That goes back to the stalkerware. We are opening ourselves up to a world, and it's already here, but people can curve this now where they can eliminate what companies know about them, and they should. And they should take it very seriously, because again, you may not have anything to hide per se because you're not doing anything illegal, but most people commit several felonies a day and they don't realize it. And it's petty stuff, but they're still crimes. But if, you know, there's nothing for them, there's no visible proof that it was done or whatever, then nobody got harmed, nobody really cares. But the reality is that those can be used against someone in the court of law for something else to gain leverage. And you know, oh, well, I pay for my music and stuff. Cool. Who else has a bunch of downloaded MP3s? I know I do, from the 90s, 2000s, right? Everybody had downloaded MP3s, torrented this, that, and the other. Those are felonies. Those are punishable crimes by fines. And while it seems silly, like, oh, well, they're not going to do that, they do. But if you open up the doorway where, hey, you have reasonable cause to go and get a warrant for this person now that they've been using their devices, or you can prove they use their devices to do something questionably legal, guess what? Now you've opened up the doorway for them to look into everything else you're doing, whether or not you want them to. And also remember, this is something I've been having to educate a lot of people on. Biometrics is not protected under the Fourth Amendment, but your password is. So on your phone, if you happen to use a smartphone, don't use your thumbprint scanner. Use a fucking password. Don't use a facial scanner. Use a password, because that is protected. But because of the fact that your facial expression and stuff isn't, literally, someone can get your mugshot and unlock your fucking phone. And there's nothing that can stop them from doing so, because it's not protected. Your DNA is not protected. Those types of things, including your thumbprint, all of that information can and will be used against you, regardless of what you're doing is right or wrong. Do you really need law enforcement to know that you and your wife got in a fight 2 weeks ago? Do you see what I mean? Like a fight over, you didn't close the fucking toilet lid or something, right? Like you know, 2 o'clock in the morning. Do you see what I mean? Do they really need to know that information? No, and they shouldn't.
So what do you think about social media platforms in general? Can you use any of those social media platforms safely from a privacy standpoint, you think?
Twitter is probably about the safest if you use the web app only and you keep a separation in your personal and everything else. But then again, once you remove the personal, you get into that ball game of whether or not you keep alias separations, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, you have to look at it. What are you willing to expose to others, and what is your comfortable risk level? Because each person's different on that, right? Your risk level and my risk level are much different than, say, a completely anon account who is anon for various reasons, including but not limited to, you know, legalities, country of where they may be, how they're getting to Twitter, what they're doing. All of that is just part of that formula. And each person is different. And like I said, there's really no checklist. It becomes a personal decision of what they're willing to accept and what they're willing to do. And Facebook is not safe, obviously. Twitter really isn't. Mastodon's pretty good. Outside of that, I don't even have a Facebook. I have Twitter. That's my only social media, by the way. And Reddit and 4chan. And Reddit I really don't even use, but 4chan I do. But 4chan kind of enforces the anonymous thing by most, except for IP address, obviously, to track what you're doing if you do something wrong, like posting shit that's illegal, that kind of stuff. But outside of that, you know, if you really want the closest thing to unbridled social media, 4chan is probably going to be it. And that's the closest to a censorship-free platform we have. You can say and do just about whatever you want to on there. Whereas Twitter, you can't even talk about COVID. You can't do certain things. Otherwise, they deplatform you. Hell, if you make the wrong joke about people, they'll deplatform you. My buddy Carbon got deplatformed earlier this year, because of gym friend memes. You know what I mean? And all of that, and all of that stuff comes
Those are hysterical, by the way.
Yeah, dude, that right there was, but literally, you know, instead of someone laughing it off, instead they chose to go the DMCA route and try to get lawyers and stuff involved, and trying to make things much more complicated, you know?
Well, it's interesting. Like, my wife and I have been early adopters of, social media. I've been on Twitter for a long time. I think we got our accounts when we first, they first started up. And it's interesting. My wife and I, we have 4 kids, and we have never put our kids' names or pictures on any social media platform ever. And this was a conscious decision we made a long time ago, because I didn't want to violate their privacy.
Hold
Because
on one moment. I got in. I had to take care of it. Go
no
ahead.
worries.
Sorry
So
about that.
I was just saying that we've never put our kids, we never doxed our kids. We never put their photo online ever,
Don't.
even when they were little, and never put their names on there. And at the time, this is going back some time now, but they didn't really have photo recognition, facial recognition tech back then. But we said, just out of the respect for them and, just creepers in general, I don't want to put their faces out there. But looking hindsight, my kids don't have any of that data out there right now. And my
Those
oldest
kids,
is
your kids are going to be sovereign, man. Like I hate to say
hopefully.
that, but hey, but like if they keep on that, right? Like kudos to you, because a lot of parents don't do that. And you know what? Kudos to you because, and I know this sounds stupid, and a lot of people will hate me for this because I'm not a parent, but I'll say this much: I don't believe kids should ever be on a social media platform at all until they're 18. And the reason why is because at that point, the state and everyone else treats them as an adult, but at that moment, they can make a decision of what they want to do. And it should be left up to that. Their information should not be up there. Pictures should not be up there. Birthdays should not be up there, things like that. And the reason why is because allow that individual to choose what they're going to do about their privacy. And people, and I'm going to say this and piss off some SJWs if you don't mind. I'm going to say they want to treat the gender movement and all this stuff like that, right? Treat privacy the same fucking way. Don't put your kids' shit out there until they're adult enough to make a fucking decision. And if you want to, people may get upset about it. People may not like that approach. But I think that's the only respectable thing to do to an adult is allow the adult to decide what they want to do. And believe it or not, I think a lot more people will be less likely to be using social media if given the opportunity in that way versus just seeing their parents constantly on the stuff. I mean, hell, the other day I went into the store and I seen like an 8-year-old on their phone on their Facebook account and their mother on Facebook too. And I find that to be very dangerous. And not only for, the kid's safety, but also what information is that kid providing about his family its family that they don't necessarily, the family doesn't necessarily want to be disclosed.
Or even know about.
Yeah.
If they're not even paying attention.
Yeah. Because the phone's the babysitter now. It used to be TV. The worst thing you had to deal with whether or not the kids were watching Cinemax or Skinemax after dark or HBO after dark, right? Like that was like the worst. They were watching scrambled porn or something. Now kids have full access to everything they want. And, like YouTube and everything like that is the new babysitter. And the dangerous part is like I've watched some of the stuff that my nephews watch before. I would never allow, like we would have been hit in the back of our heads growing up had we tried to watch something like that on TV. And, he's like 8. And when you start looking at that, that's dangerous as hell, because where do they draw the line? Because they're not mature enough to understand what is content creation for financial gain versus what is reality. Do you see what I mean? I mean, like that's dangerous territory there for them.
So, my wife and I are very doxed, like on social media, because we do use it because we're kind of out there on his personality. So, I mean, but we do it with, our eyes wide open, right? We knew that going in that we made that choice consciously.
And you accepted that risk, though. That's the thing. You accepted that. You understood what you were going to do, and you did it. And that's fair. That's the approach you should take. Understand what you're about to disclose, but own it. Don't get upset if more comes out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I always tell people, look, but you'll rarely see me post very many things that are personal nature, like where I'm going, that I'm on vacation. And, if I do post a picture of something of where I've been, it's usually after the fact, after I'm already back home from a security standpoint. I do think about those kind of things.
Yeah.
But we actually homeschool our kids, and we limit screen time. We don't even have cable TV in our house at all. We don't have satellite. So in some ways, we're very tech forward because my kids are taking computer programming classes and they're very digitally, they're very
Don't
adept. But on the
don't
other
tell me
hand,
they're learning JavaScript. Please tell me they're not.
no,
Good,
Linux,
good,
Linux and
good.
Scratch and some other stuff. But I think what the other thing is though, like, but we didn't give our oldest her first phone until she was in college. Now she started college while she was in high school. So, but we said, well, you're on campus, on a college campus. I'm assuming you're mature enough to handle a phone.
Yes.
Right at that point. But on the other hand, like our other younger three, none of them have their own phone. None of them four have a social media account at all. And then we actually bought a special lockdown phone from Gab Wireless, of all things, which is a super, super lockdown phone that we use as a checkout phone for our kids, because none of the kids own their own phone, and it doesn't allow photos. It doesn't allow surfing on the internet. It's all locked down. We just do it's like, oh, you're going somewhere, take the phone with you. And
See,
this
good.
is the phone. And so my wife and I, so on one hand, we're involved with crypto, we're, very out there on social media. On the other hand, we got our kids very locked down. So, I mean, it's a weird kind of balance. But I guess going forward, which I would recommend, especially other parents, is it is a balance and there is nuance to it. Kids can have access to a phone, but I don't allow my kids to have TVs in their room either. Right? I don't have a TV in my room. My bedroom, for instance.
There's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with no TVs in the rooms. Like, I'm a firm believer that, like, I don't like TVs in the room, mainly because you find yourself watching garbage. And, like, there's really only 4 classifications of commercials now: prescription medications, insurance, and every now and then a car commercial will come on, and then advertisements for other channels in their network. That's it. That's the 4 archetypes of commercials you see today. I mean, the other day I literally watched. I was running a compiler. I was compiling a large project, and it normally takes about 47 minutes, 50 minutes to build. So I'm sitting there waiting, and I was watching TV in the background just to see. And I took note. In 1 hour, there was 17 prescription pill commercials.
Wow.
In 1 hour of TV viewing. And that's ridiculous when you start thinking about that, how often these breaks are. But like, most of TV is just advertisement. But if you look at the internet, most of the internet is too, unless you're using proper, OPSEC tools such as ad tracking blocks, that kind of stuff. Or you're using Pi-hole at home, which I highly recommend also. That is a good step forward. People are looking for something, very inexpensive way of providing a pretty good ad deterrence. Pi-hole. You get a Raspberry Pi, set it up. It's a good weekend project. If you have kids and they're 14, 15 years old, 13 years old or something, especially during this, all this, you can spend time with them, teaching them how to set this up. You know what I mean? And like, those are just some fun projects that you can make something. However, it can provide a layer of protection for your operational security, both for you and your family. Like
VPNs. Let's get into VPNs real quick. What do you think of VPNs?
All right. So recently I wrote a thread about this. VPNs are a touch and go thing. Here's why. A VPN at home is kind of a moot point and dangerous. Here's why. It's dangerous because your ISP can correlate the traffic explosions that you're doing things such as, but not limited to, torrenting, and they can see you're only VPNing during torrenting. They can literally tell definitively based on your traffic burst that you're using a VPN to access that and to use that much bandwidth. Like, they can profile the traffic. It's easy to see. The other problem with the VPN, one of the biggest problems is where the country of location that they run their business, because what laws do they have to adhere to specifically for subpoenas and law enforcement in the country you abide in. So for example, if they're in Panama, they're okay. If they're in Geneva, Switzerland, they're definitely okay, because Geneva typically just says fuck off. And that's where you have to really do your research on it, right? You can also set up your own VPN, but the problem is what a lot of people don't understand about setting up your own VPN if you have it at home is that if you VPN into home while you're gone, you're using your home's public address that's associated to your ISP account. So if you do something stupid, guess where it's going to come back to? Oh, I was on VPN, bro. Yeah, but you're using the public IP address of your fucking house, which you pay for with a subscription to an ISP that have all your KYC information. Wonder where that subpoena is going to go, right? Like, so, and the problem is when you use you use a service or like AWS or something like that to host your own, you again are using KYC information to be able to host that service. And then again, can be problematic for law enforcement or problematic for you because of law enforcement. I don't care what people do on the internet. I really don't. You do you. But at the same time, you have to know how to protect yourself, and VPNs are a great solution. You just need to understand the attack surface for law enforcement. And, you know, people say, oh, well, I'm not doing anything illegal. I just log into BitMEX and day trade. Well, that's technically illegal under the United States law. That's why BitMEX doesn't offer the service to the United States. Boom. Oh, shit. I never realized that. Well, yeah, those are problems. People don't really grasp some of
like online casinos, same thing, really. Yeah. A lot of people don't understand that it's illegal for an American to access online casinos, even if the online casinos are abroad.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot of services that people just don't really get the legalities of because it's not common knowledge. Like, for example, you know, for a long time, it was seen as illegal to use certain types of encryption. Still is. There's illegal encryption. You can't export software if it utilizes it from the United States. And people are like, what? I'm like, yeah, there are certain algorithms that you can't export software from here to sell abroad because it uses that encryption because it's deemed as weaponized. You know, like there's a lot of stuff from a technical legal perspective that people don't get because there's also not a guidebook on it. You know what I mean? Like there's an entire set of case law in the Electronic Frontier Foundation and others, including the Tor Project and various other organizations that try their best to educate the public. But the problem is that there are so many cases and so much that changes on a rapid basis. And, you know, people ask me how often technology changes. And I tell them, what you thought was a good idea today, by the end of the next week, it will have already been, that's last week's news. There are better ways, better methods to do that implementation now. You know, there are better tools, there are better frameworks, better this, better that, better libraries. And it changes so quickly because as we have more people become developers, it progresses. So because of that, law is slow to catch up, but as these case by cases set these precedents for, like, you know, VPN laws and things like that, and what can be done legally and illegally, you have to run the gamut of where does that slope end and where do we as a society start fighting back. You know, I mean, our government's quick to say, hey, you can't do certain things on the internet, but I mean, meanwhile, Project Playpen, are you familiar with Operation Playpen?
I'm not.
Oh, our government ran a child pornography site for about 6 weeks on the Tor network while running paid advertisement on Torch, which is the search engine for Tor. And then people were like, oh my God, why did they do that? Because they had seized control of the server and they were trying to gain all the users and getting IP addresses and trying to utilize correlation attacks because they were controlling a majority of the exit nodes and things like that. And they were trying to be able to dox these people so that they could serve them subpoenas. People were like, oh, well, that's great that they're doing that, you know, the blocking kiddie porn. And I agree. I'm anti-child pornography because kids have, you know, no say so, and most of this shit's abuse and a bunch of other things. There is a huge problem with the way they went about it, though, because what's to stop them from basically running these types of attacks without the public's knowledge and then claim someone else ran the service? Because that's illegal. It's illegal for you to run a honeypot doing such a thing. Why is it legal for our government to? Do you see what I mean? Like, and let's say what even that. Well, let's say it was drug market site, insert whatever. Now all of a sudden it's okay for them to do this because of the guise of security. Just like going back to, it's okay for them to do contact tracing for the idea of security. It's okay for them to invade you or to compromise an entire system that's designed to protect people from oppression by creating more oppressive methods to be used. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I think that's why we need to be, vigilant, because whatever power government gets, it never cedes it. Once it, it never goes away. And I always tell people that you have to, be careful when you give government more power. And it's complicated, sometimes, especially when you got, like this COVID stuff, which is, it's turned into a political nightmare, and it's hard to just, it's hard for, especially just, the average guy on the street to know what to believe, what not to believe, and what to be worried about and what not to be worried about. I think we've gotten to the point where people don't trust anything. And I think that's almost
they shouldn't. I'm a firm believer in that. I trust no government, trust no agency, because at the end of the day, they all have an incentive to be able to pin something on you, even if you haven't done it. If they speculate on it, they got numbers they got to keep too, quotas. They got quotas for arrests and everything like that. And if you can be the fall guy for catching something as simple as an MP3, later found out that you had conversations with somebody who may or may not have been, dealing drugs on the internet, hey, you're an accessory. Hey, it's more money to the DA. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, all of that falls into a very dangerous thing, because governments are well aware of what technology can do. The government is still in a draconic era, and the reason why I say that is because recently the NSA posted that they're having a hard time with getting hackers and stuff because of marijuana. Well, yeah, no shit. Most hackers smoke, do drugs and stuff, and most of Silicon Valley does too. Like, and that's also a misunderstanding, that people have it in their head that programmers, what they see on TV and what they see, like the programmer types and things like that, that's not majority of what builds the software. Majority of these people have vices and are real humans and have problems, and they cope with those problems. And sitting at a desk or standing at a desk for 14 hours, I'm sure you can attest to this, you might need a beer or two at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Sometimes the beginning of the day.
Yeah. Hey, as long as it's after 10 a.m., you can drink, right? As long as it's in the office.
Day drinking's a thing now, right? On quarantine, right?
Hey, everybody's house is like Vegas right now. It doesn't matter what hour it is, cocktails are welcomed,
Yeah, it's tough out there. So one last question before we wrap up. What would be something that you can do to protect yourself, like from RFIDs? Like, you see these wallets, and is there any kind of devices out there like that, or solutions that, like a purse or a wallet or any of that stuff? Is it hooey, or does that stuff really work?
Some of it works, some of it does not. The thing is you have to really do your research to find out the fabric that's made with, how they're doing the shielding, and what you're trying to prevent. So for example, like a debit card you could suppress with wrapping with enough leather, that kind of stuff, to some level, because it doesn't have power, right? Like, it doesn't have power. Now, when you start talking about like passports and stuff like that, the newer passports have a very strong RFID chip, and you would be better to get almost like a mini Faraday cage. But the problem is, don't buy a Faraday cage. Don't buy a mini Faraday cage from a company, because you've literally disclosed to someone else that you're trying to obfuscate that information. And, like, if I were looking to attack someone and I knew they had certain devices or certain purchases recently, I would just figure out what they purchased by breaking into that service and seeing what they purchased, find the weakness in that. Nothing is a silver bullet for security. There's no silver bullet in software for security. There's no silver bullet in hardware for security. It's just like people keeping crypto wallets, right? A lot of people ask me about those too, going on the same RFID thing. Do you use them? No, here's why. It's a glorified USB fucking drive. USB drives fail all the goddamn time. Literally all the fucking time. And so now you're adding another piece of firmware with another moving part on something that's already touch and go as it is. How many times have you went to use a USB drive, even if it's not even a year old, turned it on or plugged it into your device and it doesn't work anymore? How many times have you had that happen?
Quite a few.
Okay, how many times do you think that happens with things that are specifically designed to stop certain technologies? A lot. And that's why I say that. That's why that parallel is important, because just because something's designed to stop it, well, it's designed to stop it as long as you don't wash it, as long as you don't clean it with certain chemicals, as long as you don't expose it to certain hours of sunlight. You know, all of these things are important to keeping that product to work the way it's supposed to at its maximum operating range. If you exceed any of that by having a life, then you compromise the device and what it does. You see what I mean? Even phones, they have a temperature shut off, right? Have you ever been outside? I know you're in a hotter area than I am at times, but you've been outside before and your phone shut off for temperature overreach, right?
Mm-hmm. You leave it in your car in the summertime. If you leave, like, especially a smartphone or an iPhone, that thing will get up to, like, 130 degrees.
So think about it like this. What if the device that you're intending to protect your RFID with is only supposed to operate in a certain temperature range, and all of a sudden you've exceeded it, but because you exceeded it, now there are weak spots in the protective layer. Oh, well, I didn't think about that. Well, yeah, no shit. Most people don't read the manual either for anything, right? Like, and that kind of goes back to what I'm saying. The consumerism side of it impacts the ability to properly do things. The DIY culture, or the DIY, whatever, do it yourself DIY. The DIY culture today on YouTube, what I would like to see is more people and more viewership on the people who are building, hey, how to make your own personal RFID preventative wallets. Here's how to do this. Here's how to build this from scratch. This is what you need to know. This is so that you can go pay with cash, no trace of you, especially during this quarantine, because you can use a mask and gloves and cover yourself up completely. And in some places it's still snowing, so definitely you can wear a jacket or whatever in public. Nobody knows who the hell you are. And you don't wear the same clothes you've worn in there before, and you can buy this stuff to do it. You see what I mean? Like, that's important, because now you're not only providing privacy to yourself, but also you've built the device to protect and to enable more privacy on your end without compromising your information to a company to provide that as a service or a device to you. Because literally they become the attack surface now. And like, just like cloud computing and everything else, online storage, all of that is an attack surface. Like, everybody's like, oh yeah, just use Dropbox, just use this. Well, that's great. If you're going to rely on them, use GPG to protect those files and things to a different level. Do you see what I mean? Now only you have that access that's protected by a password that only you know. And, I tell people GPG can be a great password manager, because you can literally create an encrypted file on a actual fucking air gap device that doesn't even have a network interface to keep your passwords on and protected, so that only you have access to that device to view it. You see what I mean? At that point, you're able to kind of take some of that control. But if you use things improperly, you might as well not use any operational security measures, because at that point you're breaking the guise of it, right? Like, it's like I was saying with Tor. If you use Tor improperly, it's better not to use it at all, because you're just telling everybody, I'm using Tor, but I'm doing it terribly.
So you're drawing attention to yourself,
Correct.
whereas, and so, you eliminate any possibility of hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. And the idea is to hide in plain sight. And the thing is what I tell people is run exit nodes, run relays, run Tor, use Tor, but use it properly, use tools properly. That's why I was doing the OpVile stuff. I'm going to continue now that things have died down a little bit. I'm trying to educate people on how to have a toolkit, but to understand the toolkit, to use it properly. Because just because you know that this tool will help you do X, Y, or Z, if you don't know how to do it properly, doing X, Y, and Z could get you a case. You see what I mean? And it's just like, I recently, one of the last posts I did was like breaking into wireless networks, and, how to do WPA PSK breaking with BetterCap and was it Hashcat. And people say all the time, like, why does someone need to know that? Well, it's better they know how to do it now versus when they're in a dire straits and they're trying to look it up.
Good point. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Where can people find out more about you?
At Nixops on Twitter. That's my social media. My DMs are always open. I may not respond quickly. I'm available on Telegram too under the same thing, but if I get too much spam on there, sometimes I have to turn Telegram off. I get a lot of messages on there, so sometimes I don't check it every day. But yeah, Twitter is the predominant way you'll find more stuff about me. some, interviews and stuff like this one that are on YouTube and other podcasts, you can find me, but literally Twitter is the best way of finding me, just because it's my ability to limit what people know and do about me,
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm Rob McNealy. Check us out on the web, robmcnealy.com. Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.